Here now.
Okay.
Happy New Year 2021 and welcome to the Timeout podcast. The reason why we call this timeout because in sport, at times you take the time out quite literally to restrategize and come back stronger after a period of play that probably hasn't been working for you or has been working for you, but you're striving for improvement. With those many words, I think that just underlines what Timeout Podcast is all about. It is all about bringing issues into perspective, talking about the headlines, what is behind the headlines as well. My name is Michael Kwambo, MK, and I'm joined by Richard Wanjohi. Richie, some words from you.
Thank you very much, Kwambo. Yes, indeed. We're looking at different perspective of sport from a business, commercial, and also social and political point of view. We know the world of, we know sport is universal, and as such, we want to look at all those different aspects, not just on the headlines and the results, but give you more a taste of what happens in the background as well. And Karibuni.
Talking about the headlines, Kenyan media continue with their blackout of Kenyan football. The Fourth Estate has expressed their displeasure with the way they've been treated by FKF. Richie, is there going to be an end in sight to this stalemate?
Now, I think it's a bit of a challenge, both for the FKF administration and also for the media, because the media feel like they have been repressed by the FKF officials, pushing them to their limits and denying them accessibility to some of the venues and the games. But then, as we say, the Fourth Estate is there to do their job. They're there to share the results and also share their perspectives of the game, and also to criticize where things that are not happening right, and also just to give a different a perspective of the sport. So as such, we feel like it might take a bit longer. I hear the Media Council of Kenya is in discussion with the media fraternity and also the sports editors. But let's see what happens in the next 5 to 10 days.
And I like the way you say the Fourth Estate. Obviously, their work is to view things from a different perspective. And one thing I do know, having been in sport all this time, is that we need each other. We just can't black each other out. We may have our internal mechanisms to get the news out, but I think it has to be done in a complementary role. And I am looking forward to the end of this stalemate. I think Kenyan football, Kenyan sport deserves a lot more coverage, and let's just come together for the good of the game, football and sport in general. And as we stick with football, Kenyan champions, Gor Mahia, they pride themselves in being called the husband of teams. They have won the Kenyan Premier League 19 times. But on 26th of December, they traveled to Algeria, played against CR Belouizdad. They lost by 6 goals to 0 in that CAF Champions League qualifier. There is the return match coming up. Do you think they can overturn that deficit first of all?
I think it will be a miracle and a huge mountain to climb for them. As we said, Algerians did their work and also gave them the leeway of postponing the game, but they had been preparing comprehensively and extensively for this game. They have read about Gor Mahia, they know their weak points, and unfortunately, the team has been, having all sorts of issues from officials telling them to take their allowances and skip the game, from unpaid bills. I think, as we say, if you don't prepare well, then don't expect any magic in the pitch.
Definitely. It is quite unfortunate that just as we are getting into a crucial stage, that is Gor Mahia, they get affected by off-the-pitch issues. This is not the first time it is happening. This is not the first Kenyan club that it is happening to. I mean, what can we do to get things right? Not only for Gor Mahia, but for Kenyan clubs, for Kenyan sport across the board.
Again, as we keep saying, it's important for sports officials and sports clubs to look at sport from a business and commercial point of view. If you look at the Algerians, they have been preparing, they have had their venue sorted, they have their allowances sorted, they have even taken, acclimatization to a whole new level so that they prepare for the game. If we keep using excuses of allowances and not paying bills, and also, as we were saying, travel logistics, when you knew that you were going to play a new opponent in North Africa, you start looking at options that you can use to travel to that location. It's not for you to start saying, no, let's postpone the game. It might come to that maybe if there are issues of, the COVID-related issues, or, they started changing plans. But if it's from your own undoing, then it's just... It begs to to question: are we really a sport, or rather, sorry, are we a commercial entity, or are we just here for hobbies?
I think we are still running our organizations like welfare organizations a bit too casual. We have to be a lot more professional. Just looking at the Algerians, I know they've been in the country since Saturday, like you said, acclimatizing and all that stuff. I mean, they've done their logistics, they've got it right. People will always bring the commercial element, the money element, but I think sometimes before the money comes, you have to be well run professionally to attract that money, to attract that sponsorship. And like I said earlier, it is something that we are not seeing locally.
Indeed.
And then, of course, there were some side shows there as well. Like you said, the officials actually urging the players to take their allowances and skip the game. And then there was word, this is unconfirmed, we really can't tell whether it was true or not, that a Gor official was held in Algiers after the game due to a pending hotel bill. An embarrassment, if you ask me.
I think, as we say, if you prepare, if you don't prepare, then you're going to fail in whatever you aspire to be, and be it sport, be it in business. And that's the thing that Kenyan clubs, or our local clubs, need to learn. The minute you're chosen to represent the country at international or continental level, start preparing from that point on. The government may chip in where it can, and every so often we have well wishers giving money. But again, it's not about well wishers. It's not about people having to contribute for you to run the team. You have officials running the show. We have a management team that is sort of appointed to look into these dealings. Why are we having officials being held in hotels in 2021?
Yeah, it is quite unfortunate. But like we said again, until we get things right, we will probably just be running around in circles. Talking about circles, I'd like to equate them to the 5 rings of the Olympics. The Olympic Games were supposed to take place in 2020, but because of the COVID-19 outbreak, they were pushed a year ahead to 2021. The National Olympic Committee of Kenya is set to launch bubble-like training camps next month in February. And the big question is, will this affect Kenya's performance from 2016 in terms of the track record, or will it enhance it? What do you think?
I think if you look at the different sports that we're going to be represented in, for the athletics, it wouldn't be an issue, because most of those runners usually have their own camps or training regimes. What would happen is that they might have a bit more of cohesion and also just more focused training that would help them going forward. But I hope it will not be the same story that we hear, that people go into camp, there are no allowances, or the conditions there are not conducive enough, because we have a good number of elite runners, the likes of Kipchoge, the likes of Helen Obiri coming into camp. So if we are able to maintain top-notch camps, then that's the way to go. For team sport, I mean, it's only fair that you have a training camp that you're able to gel as a team. The sevens team, I think, for both men and women, that would be something that would work very well. It would be good for us also, not just go there to play, but also maybe get better results and hopefully a medal. We have other team sports, including volleyball as well. This is a good idea, and I think if they start preparations in Feb and the date remains as June, then there'll be no excuses for performances if they put in a good training regime.
Yeah, well, I concur with you on that, and I'm just trying to think forward or look forward, especially now that COVID-19 has become part and parcel of our lives. Do you think that these bubble-like training camps are something that will become the norm, that will be adopted by sports organizations and, just generally sporting entities in the country going forward?
I think if we look at, especially in the international experiences, the NBA, the EPLs, they've been able to focus on their teams training and also performing or rather playing in such conditions. So it's also important that we also try and replicate some of these examples locally, and hopefully we keep to those strict conditions, because then again, you don't want to have a top-notch performer get into camp, then they break their rules, and then suddenly we have a case of someone getting ill or testing positive, then maybe even losing a life. If we're able to stick to the conditions and also just provide the best of the of training gear and also training facilities, it's the way to go. And it's important that we start this early, because if you look at it, June is not too far away. That's about 5 months from now.
Big question though is how do we, for example, like you said, it's good to have the camps and all these regulations about it, but how do we, for example, ensure that compliance is adhered to? Because I'm giving an example of the athletes who will probably be managed by agents and will have to leave the country at one point or another to go and take part in meetings across the world. How do we mitigate these factors? Because every time they come, there'll be a series of tests and so on and so forth. So do you keep them in the bubble through and through until June, or do we allow them to go back and mitigate their travel through the tests and so on and so forth? And now that when we include the tests, how do we, for example, meet the costs for that? Because we'd like to think, yes, NOC has got its sponsors, it has got its funding, but in the places of individual athletes leaving the camp to go and look for more money, how do we mitigate that?
I think it's important that NOC works, makes arrangements or starts negotiations with the agents as early as possible, because a lot of these events will, prior to the Olympics, we might have GPs coming up that some of the athletes might want to take part in. But then it's for NOC and the agents to decide up to what limit or how many competitions can you go out of your way, or just go and participate. Because then again, we've also had that issue even before COVID, where athletes are participating in Grand Prix or IAAF Diamond League games, or rather meets. Then when they come back, they're not able to perform at their par. So it's important that we start working on a solution right now as NOC, and they can look at mitigating the cost of those tests and also the different arrangements that they might have with the agencies. But it's also imperative that they look at what needs to be done, because then you don't want to run too many races. Then by the time you get to June or July in the Olympics, we have worn-out athletes going to represent the country.
Still related to the Olympics, but I think also to global performances, there's a very important signature that was appended onto a bill on the 31st of December. President Uhuru Kenyatta signed into law the anti-doping bill as he get Kenya's compliance with the World Anti-Doping Code for 2021. Remember, it was coming into effect on the 1st of January, and that is why I was saying left it quite late. Very important signature appended on the 31st of December. But away with all the semantics, what does that mean for Kenyan sport?
I think it's important that we understand the doping bills, or the doping codes, because then world sport has become very strict on anti-doping and also just the use of prohibited drugs. And we have seen this worsen, especially for athletes in the past year. In 2020, we have quite a number of top athletes who tested positive for banned substances. So it's important that this was signed into law. That means then sports federation and also sports athletes need to take this very seriously, and as much as possible do as many tests and also be as open with that information as possible. Going into the Olympics and any of the other games that we may be participating, definitely this will come into force, and we don't want a situation where our top athletes are going to embarrass the country at that level.
The biggest issue locally is compliance. Do you think ADAC, the Anti-Doping Association, Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, has the capacity, number one, to enforce anti-doping? Number two, do you think they have the teeth as well to come down hard on offenders?
I think from previous reports and also previous engagements, it's important that ADAC takes a very proactive role in engaging athletes and also officials in what anti-doping entails, and also not looking at athletes as pariahs, because athletes are there to make good their performances and also make the country look good. So it's important they give that information as much as possible and share workshops or sessions with the athletes and sports officials. It's also important that they start seeking funding for the different laboratories or tests that they might be conducting. I hear once in a while, I think that there is insufficient funding, but I think we have some money going into Sports Kenya, the association, and also if the government comes in, because if you sign such a bill into law, it's only important that you fund such facilities.
Well, on my part, I do think that ADAP, yes, they are doing something. They have been quite proactive. I just do think that away from the mainstream sports, that is athletics, rugby, football, there needs to be a lot more civic education around these other sports because you will find people ingesting supplements, not knowing what it is comprised of. You will have, especially in many other sports that I've seen, sports people, imbibing in different kinds of things like liquor, engaging in things like the chewing of cat, which obviously have banned substances. The big question is how do we get that civic education down there to reach the what I would say, not the elite sports, but the sports that don't always get the limelight.
I think, as you say, it's important that they work with the National Olympic Committee because then it's sort of the umbrella body that holds most of the sports association or the participating sports, together. So if they start at that level, because NOC, for the better part of 2020, once the pandemic was confirmed, they ran very rigorous workshops starting from the media engagements and also the sports athletes and other stakeholders in the sport. So it's also important that they do the same for anti-doping, sharing what is in the World Anti-Doping Code, and also just creating more awareness on what needs to be done for athletes or people preparing for sport, both from the mainstream and also for the lesser sports that we know of.
Yeah, true indeed. And moving forward, we continue to be ravaged by COVID-19 across the board, locally and internationally. There was a circular released by State House last week, number one, extending the curfew until the 12th of March 2021. But one of the bullet points in that circular was that the government of Kenya has banned all extracurricular activities, including the Kenya Secondary Schools Sports Association games. And I mean, for the second year running, we will not have school games. Schools have opened, no school games. I saw the guidelines saying that interactions with other schools in terms of sports, debates, and so on and so forth are prohibited for the time being. That effectively just puts a close to any ambitions that KSSA had for hosting games, at least for the first time. I don't know if it will be reviewed moving forward. But I think on my part, as somebody who engaged in sports in school, of course, mixing it up with academics, is that I think it's sad. I think it's draconian, but that is my opinion.
I concur with you, Kwambo, because then again, we have a situation of kids being out of school for the last 9 months. And then they come back into a situation where you'll have a very tight timetable and, very rigorous and engaging, content in class or in their curriculum. If it is important that they maintain such standards, then it's only fair that they're given a bit of leeway to engage in extracurricular activities. I think if the government would be, a bit lenient, especially by the second or the third month, to look into possibilities of where some of the team sports can participate, or maybe a few of them can start sort of sampling, localized games. It would be better because then that will be able to give the students or participants an outlet of venting whatever pent-up pressures are, given what they'll be going through in their academic fields.
Yeah, at this point, I just want to thank everybody who is listening and watching Time Out podcast. We are talking about issues affecting sport both locally and internationally, but also sticking to the news headlines. rising cases of COVID-19 in the EPL. Is it time to take a break, or do they continue as the United Kingdom goes into another lockdown?
The EPL is always an outlier in so many ways. It's one of the leagues that always maintains games during the winter break. But I think with the COVID situation, they have gotten not just a regular winter playing season, but also this situation of having to be in a lockdown for the the third time now in the UK. And we've also seen a lot of cases rising to the point that some of the games have been postponed. I think it might be given the outlook, or the projections in the next I think 5 to 7 days, they might get to a point that they might postpone a few more games, or maybe kill a few, especially the cup fixtures. But let's see. I think the beauty of them is that they're able to take very quick and unilateral decisions that are able to look into the interest of the game, both for the players and also for the sport.
Yeah, then obviously with the experience from a year ago, they're obviously a year wiser, so they probably know how to mitigate any circumstances, any issues related to COVID-19. I do know that British boxing has suspended all boxing activity for the next month. I was listening to a podcast yesterday for one of my favorite football teams in the EPL, and they intimated that they probably will be no shutdown of the EPL. Just like you said, there will probably be some postponements, but the EPL has to continue. Remember, there are also massive investments that have been pumped into that league, and cancelling it unilaterally is obviously going to affect not only the footballers but large spheres of society and the economy. Speaking of which, just looking at it from a Kenyan perspective, there are some sports that have not been active since March of 2020. And it's not only the sports that have struggled, but the satellite activities as well. I'll give an example of rugby, where, leaving the office every so often, you will once in a while hail a cab, and the cab driver tells you that he's restricted to probably one or two trips down to this alleyway, and yet on a game day he will probably do 5 or 6. The outlying areas, the entertainment and hospitality areas as well, some are completely closed down. So the effects, like we said, are ravaging sport. But I think it is important that we continue to keep our heads up. Those are just some sentiments, obviously speaking as an affected party. F1. Let's talk about F1. The Australia GP is coming up, and it is looking dicey as cases in Australia surge, and Norris has tested positive.
Yeah, again, it's a situation of the sports practitioners taking a look and saying, okay, what works best? Is it in the interest of the game to continue, or do we then have a reduced team, or reduced participants in the race? And again, going by what happened last year, I think the Australia GP again was cancelled. So 2021 seems like a continuation of what happened in 2020. Let's hope that doesn't get to that point, because then it will mean another squid calendar for the F1 teams. And I think they have also increased a lot of what they're doing with the testing, both from the localized level and also for the traveling teams or the traveling crews as well. For Norris to test positive, I think maybe we might have a few of the other drivers that might test positive as well, because most of them broke for the holiday after the season was done in November. But hopefully, again, as I say, let's hope the situation doesn't get to a point that the race is cancelled.
Yeah, and moving away from Australia, let's go to the USA and the National Basketball Association, popularly known as the NBA. It is continuing rather stealthily, though. The NBA has been quite strict, though. I remember, must have been about a month ago, on the 5th of December, they shared penalties for violating COVID protocols. They banned their players from visiting bars, indoor gatherings. The game continues though. The decision to carry out those measures in terms of.
Sorry, I think you cut off at some point, but what I'll say is that...
I don't think you got me the first time. Yeah, so let me just get back to it. And it was the NBA has detailed penalties for violating COVID-19 protocols. They've revealed bans from visiting bars, clubs, and other indoor gatherings. Do you think that is a good enough mitigation measure by the NBA?
I think taking it from what they are looking at, over and above the game itself, it's looking at the situation that is happening in the US. I think we had one of the worst outbreaks of the pandemic, and still continues. So for the NBA officials, it was only important or imperative that they take such strict measures, because then again, you don't want a situation of where the teams have started playing, then you have to cancel games or you have to postpone games. Already we have a very tight calendar for enabling the players to participate in the league for 2020-2021 season, and looking into going into the Olympics, because then again we have Team US that is going to be playing in the Olympics featuring some of the NBA players. So it's only fair that you become very strict in conducting some of those tests, and also ensuring that players or officials stick to the COVID protocols of not moving out of camp and just restricting their movements.
And what has your highlight of the season so far been in the NBA?
It comes forward, I think, is what we saw Steve Curry do last week with the 62 points in the game. He is making a statement for having missed the better part of 2020 and missing the playoffs as well. He's making his comeback slowly. It will be a tight situation. I think this year, unlike 2019 and 2020 season, it's still anyone's game. The championship, the NBA playoffs championships, we might see Lakers again win this, but then as we saw, Steve Curry is going to carry GSW all the way.
Well, for me, my highlight happened on the 27th of December 2020. The Los Angeles Clippers suffered their largest ever defeat against the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks were leading. It is the biggest halftime lead in NBA history, 50 points, before completing the worst ever hammering for the Clippers, 124-73. Not a game I planned to watch, not a game I was even interested in. But first of all, because of the banter that was coming through on my WhatsApp groups and some Twitter feeds, ended up following this game.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think the Clippers to have lost with such a huge margin. And I think I think it was the second or third game they were playing for the 2020-2021 season. We had not foreseen them losing by such a margin. I think they had lost one of their key players in, is it Leonard? So getting to lose by such a margin, and interestingly, I think all through we are seeing huge scores from the games, in this new season. Without the fans, because if you look at again what happened in the Golden State Warriors game versus Portland Trail Blazers, it was 137-122, huge scores. So I think it's something that we might continue seeing going forward. But then again, that's the beauty of the game. We love seeing more baskets, and the more entertaining, the better.
It's quite interesting you talk about huge scores, because it's not only happening in the NBA, but taking you back to football as well. Defending champions in the EPL, Liverpool, a few weeks ago were hammered 7-2 by Aston Villa. We've seen quite a number of 6-1 scorelines. Manchester United have been on the receiving end of one against Tottenham Hotspurs. The number of 5-0, 6-0 scores that we're seeing right now, could it be something to do with the fact that there are no fans in the stadium, and therefore the pressure is a lot less on the players? They're able to express themselves as they would without the expectations from 60 to 70,000 demanding fans.
Yeah, I think indeed, when you have teams all equalized by the playing field, because then when you have the fans, we have a bit of an advantage. You have the third man the 13th man, sorry, or 13th fan cheering you on. But now everyone is on a level playing field. We have no fans. We have a few highlights, or maybe those who are able to afford the Zoom or connections in their venues. But then once the players get started, it's anyone's game, and we have seen top teams getting knocked huge scores, as you say, 7-2 by Aston Villa. Some of these teams have never felt such tremors in a while. But then that's the beauty of the game again. We want to see goals. No one wants to see a 0-0 game.
Definitely. And talking about goals, there has been some debate about Lionel Messi and Pele, who holds the scoring record for most goals in a single club. Is it Lionel Messi who scored and then equaled first before surpassing Pele's record, quote unquote, or is it Pele? Because there was a bit of a upheaval once Messi equaled it and then surpassed it, with Santos now coming to say, hey, wait a minute, Pele scored a total of 1,000 plus goals. It is inclusive of non-competitive games. So how do you mitigate that?
I think it's only fair that you give credit where it's due, and I think Messi has been one of the biggest talents that we've had in football in a long time, and for him to maintain his performance with one club, as we have seen, and getting to a record like he has and surpassing it, let's give him the credit for that. We don't know how long he'll be in Barcelona. I think, as we have seen from the start of this season, he expressed his displeasure. But then let's see whether Ronald Koeman and the back office will be able to maintain him in the club. For Santos to come forward and start pushing other agendas about the numbers, it's only the numbers that, numbers don't tell lies. If you want to talk about competitive games, let's stick to competitive games. If you want to add tallies of friendlies and other shenanigans, then we can always include that in the statistics.
Indeed, and that makes a case for paying an importance to record keeping, data collection. I'm sure that is going to be one of the conversations we will have in Timeout in future episodes. And just moving forward now from the football pitch to four wheels. The Dakar Rally used to be known as the Paris-Dakar Rally when we were growing up. It used to start in Paris, France. They cross the Mediterranean, journey through North Africa, and end up in Dakar, Senegal, in Africa. But of course, must have been about a decade ago, must have been 2 decades ago, if I'm not wrong, when rising cases of insecurity in the Sahara Desert led them to move first to South America and then now to Saudi Arabia. What do you take of that?
I think this is one of the sport that enjoys universal recognition, and anytime you talk about the Dakar, you always want to look at the motorcycles, the huge 4x4s, the off track vehicles, and a lot of rally enthusiasts are following that rally wherever it's located. But as you say, it's tragic that as an African continent we lost such a huge boost into the economies of the different countries that used to host the rally. We remember, as you say, coming from Paris, coming down the North Africa through the Mediterranean into Senegal and the different countries that host the Sahara Desert. But as you can see, the potential for the sport is still there. It has not been postponed and has not been cancelled for the longest time. And for Saudi Arabia to claim that they can be able to host it and still go ahead and host it and do a good show, then it means that it has a huge brand recognition and can control the numbers. So it's a bit tragic. I wish it comes back. Maybe when they get to Saudi Arabia, they might give a shout out to the people in North Africa and ask them, are you ready to host us back again? But then the situation, as you say, the security situation, this COVID pandemic situation, there are a lot of things that may be looked into, but it will be back. It will be fair for the rally to be back home.
Definitely it would. want to look at it from another perspective, where we've had countries that are event ready. They have showcased themselves as destinations for events, not only sport. Taking it to South America, which has traditionally suffered, it has been not really the third world, not really the first world, more like the second world, but they have done enough. I know that there was a time there were issues of insecurity in Chile, Paraguay, and so on and so forth, but the realization that sport, like events, can do so much to our country, not only in terms of boosting the economy, but showcasing us as a destination, sporting destination and a tourism destination. They've actually been able to get their act together, and that is how they were able to attract the Dakar rally down to South America. Going down to Saudi Arabia as well, or going up to Saudi Arabia as well, the same thing. First of all, Saudi Arabia, we do know, had very strict Sharia law enforcement, but with time and losing out to Qatar and Dubai, they decided to loosen up some of their laws, and we do see a lot more sporting events happening. The Anthony Joshua fight, for example, that's just the first for them. This is something that I think is food for thought, not only for Kenya, but for other countries around the world, to not only depend on tourism, people coming to see the big five, but also showcasing our countries as places where we can host events, because there is so much to gain from sports tourism.
Indeed, as you say, and I concur with you on that. And as you said, if you look at sport not just as a hobby or just as a welfare thing, a lot of these Arab countries have invested hugely in sport, and because they want to look at how can they attract visitors, how can they attract people to come to their destinations, how can they apply the sports science, sports medicine. We have the Qatar 2022 World Cup coming up, within a year. We have other events that will be going into the different, Arab states. We have Arab, investors looking to buy into EPL teams and also other European teams. It's about time that we look at sport, not just for its fun and beauty of it, but also from a commercial perspective. And that's where our African states need to spice up and get their act together.
Agreed, because sport not only has the capacity to unite a nation, it has the capacity to empower people. You're giving people opportunities to earn from their talent or from skills around their talent, because not everybody is going to go into competitive sport. Some could go into administration, some could go into specialized fields related to their sports and their passions. But like you said, it is food for thought, and we just hope that this food for thought will be digested pretty soon with good effects being felt. Looking at 2020, how was the year like for you in terms of sport?
I think it was a huge year where we knew the significance of sport. I think once the COVID pandemic was confirmed across different continents and the shutdowns started, the few days or weeks that we were off sport or without the sporting activities, you could even feel the cool, the dullness of our countrymen or people around you. But once the situation was improving and sport came back, you could feel the relief, not just for yourself, but those around you again. And we could see from the different, record numbers that were set in viewership, looking at, for example, the sports documentary that was done, The Last Dance, the numbers that were recorded for the NBA playoffs, the Anthony Joshua fight, and also the comeback of Tyson. So if you look at that, then we see the appreciation and the knowledge that sport is universal and that sport is here with us. And it remains one of the unifying factors, not just for a community, but also for a nation. It's also a few tragedies that happened. I think for me, the biggest were the two, the Kobe Bryant death and also Diego Armando Maradona.
Indeed. For me, in 2020, I think I learned about resilience. Some people will call it defiance, because there was a time when everything was crippled, all activities were crippled, economic, social, cultural activities were crippled. But we started waiting fast. I think it was the German Bundesliga that was the first to resume play, and then everybody else said, hey, we can do this. And eventually that is what has happened. I mean, even locally in Kenya, We have seen a resumption of sport. Of course, some sport has been going on clandestinely, but it just shows you the resilience of human beings. It shows you that defiant streak in them, that when they want to achieve something, that they can achieve it, COVID-19 or not. My concern, though, is the new strain of COVID-19. Is it going to disrupt us again in 2021, or will we soldier on, having learnt a lot of lessons from 2020? And then the bubble formats. We have thought about this in different ways, but not as a bubble per se. I know there was a point in time with our rugby where we were considering having all the games at a central venue, starting from 10 in the morning till 4 in the evening. And I mean, essentially, that is a bubble, but we just had never considered things like COVID-19. But now these are things that are turning into reality. Fun interaction and engagement, like you said, obviously less interactions in the stadium, but more through platforms such as this one that we are using. And I think it has just changed the way we look at sport and the way we look at life differently. That was my key learning from 2020.
Indeed. And as you know, as we sort of bring a close to this, then from 2020 we have seen a lot of events postponed, but then 2021 looks like it's going to be a busy calendar. But thanks again to the new strain of the virus, then we might have a few more postponements or cancellations. But then that means it's going to be one very busy year for sportsmen and also sports officials. We have seen what has happened in the EPL or in the European leagues. Players are getting pushed to perform at their optimum. But then again, we have seen a couple of injuries and concerns and about their health and welfare. But then again, it's for the beauty of sport. If you can push just a little bit harder and a bit better, then let's see what happens in 2021.
Definitely, in talking about 2021, two key events that Kenya is hosting that we are looking forward to: the Safari Rally from the 24th to the 27th of June. Richie, this thing used to evoke so much emotion, so much passion when we were kids. I remember we would do our mock safari rallies in the neighborhood, crown the winners as well, of course, with our mock rally cars. That was the kind of passion that we had as children and the interest as well. The whole country followed it. But remember back then, the safari rally was 5,000 kilometers long. It covered the length and breadth of Kenya. Right now, it is being compressed for TV and for a lot more reasons. That is just it, but I'm still looking forward to it. You?
Indeed. I was going through some of my paraphernalia in the house, and I saw a scrapbook that I have. I have scrapbooks for the safari rally because we used to cut pictures, and for the first time, my dad used to allow me to cut the papers and just keep those photos for the safari rally. But as you say, it has huge sentimental reasons, or huge sentimental value to some of us. But it's also a sport that again, if it comes back into the country, I think since 2003 when we lost it, or rather it was not part of the WRC, it's only fair that it comes back and it retains its name as the toughest rally in the world. And let's see whether it will retain that moniker going forward, and also hopefully then we'll have this for the longer time, however, whichever format then they decide to carry it.
My big question, though, the Safari Rally is, remember we talked about the passion that we used to feel when we hear the mention of the name Safari Rally as kids. The big question is, in this day and age, how do we encourage an ownership, an association with the current generation?
Okay, I think there's the work for the local organizing committees cut out. One is to create more awareness about the rally, and second is also for the government to ensure that citizens we are able to access the different areas that will be available for viewing the rally. I think we don't need social distancing for this, or even if we do, then it's select areas that we can have people lining up the roads, and also, where we'll have the fun stages. You can host it in a venue like Kasarani, where they had proposed to do that. So it's not an issue about having fans. That should never be the case, especially for rally driving. But then again, we also need local rally drivers engaged in the sport. We had a few mavericks in the 80s and 90s, the Patrick Njiros, the John Gojiris, the Toroi Teaches, the Ian Duncans, who even won the rally when it was still a WRC. But then, how are we able to get that back into the local psyche and into the local rallying scene?
Exactly. Of course, the rally these days is quite expensive. Not even quite expensive. It is extremely expensive because, as you were talking about the Mavericks, I remember the Prem and Paolo Choda, the husband and wife couple, who used to do the rally diligently in their Daihatsu every year. Their ambition just to finish. I mean, those are some of the beautiful stories from the Safari Rally. Kenya is renowned for athletics, and we get to host the World Under 20 Championships in August from the 17th to the 22nd. This is coming off the back of the World Under 18 Championships, which were held in 2017 and which were a success. And this again is something to look forward to. The next crop of talent that is going to dominate the world scene in years to come, making their debut here in Nairobi. I look forward to that. What about you?
Definitely, as you say, athletics remains one of the key highlights of the sports that we focus on as a country. The psyche that we have from Eliud Kipchoge's record-breaking feat 2 years ago, that still remains in top of mind of most athletics enthusiasts. And for us to host such an event where we are looking at talent that will be nurtured in the next 2 to 3 years, it's only fair that we give it the prominence and make sure that it's a success. My only concern is that I hope this time we'll not have a situation where the government is forced to pay for funds, but then, given what we are going through with the pandemic, we don't know whether even the funds will be accessing the venue yet. But all the same, I think it's a good plus for the Athletics Kenya team to host World Championships, and also just push forward and make their build their capacities.
Okay, as we come to the close of the show, let's look into the crystal ball. Let's look into people we think are going to light up 2021, probably even shine in the years to come. I'll start with you, Richie, and what is in your crystal ball?
I have two for now. One is a footballer. I think this happened last week or a few days ago. We have Taylor Onyango, a Kenyan-born footballer who's been playing for the Everton, I think under 20s team. I think under 21s. Yeah, he's been called up into the first team by Carlo Ancelotti, and that is a huge boon for the player, but also for the local talent. I think we have seen what has happened to the Wanyamas and the Marigas of this world. But it's only fair that we say that we have enough talent that can play in the top of any of the leagues in the world. My second talent is George Manangoi. This is a younger brother to Elijah Manangoi, a middle distance athlete. He features in the 1500 meters. Going into the calendar for the IWF Diamond League and also the Olympics, I predict he will not win gold in any of the 1500 or 800 meters. Then at least he'll be in the middle bracket.
Yeah, and just talking about Tyler Onyango, he comes from a family with a sporting pedigree. His uncles Patrick Onyango and Alan Onyango both represented Kenya in rugby. Alan Onyango was a long-serving Kenya Sevens international, must have retired at the close of 2010 or 2011. And it is obviously good to see him in action and, making his name following after his uncles, although in a different version of football. This time in a different version of football, because the rugby is actually known as rugby football. So the big question for me though is, will he be convinced to play for Kenya, or will he fancy his chances with breaking into Carlo Ancelotti's squad and obviously having an eye on England? Having said that, I look at Benson Omala from Gor Mahia. Benson Omala has lit up the Kenyan Premier League last season, playing for Western Steamer. He is in Form 4 this year, and the fact that he got a long-term contract with Gor is an indictment to his talent. The big question is, will he be able to perform well given all the unsavory news that is coming out of Gore right now, which I do know can affect a player's performance. But I feel that if managed well, if kept in the right environment, that is someone to watch. Could probably go to be as big as Dennis Oliech at his prime. That is the one talent that I am looking at.
And I like what you say about nurturing talent, because if you look at Engineer Olunga, he came through the same system in Gor Mahia. But then because of the big shoes that he had, then we could not fit him into this league, and he had to seek greener pastures elsewhere. And we have seen what he has done in parts of Asia or in Japan, and hopefully he'll maintain that streak. So it's only fair that clubs recognize what impact they have on individual players, but also on the talent that we can develop locally.
And it's nice that you bring up Olunga. I don't know if this will fall into the crystal ball. We're going a bit off script, but hey, that's a podcast. He has had a stellar season in Japan and is being courted by teams in Italy and Qatar. Of course, we do have the Kenyan populace who are vouching for a move to the EPL. But I think for Olunga, he needs to go to what best serves his interests. That's just my unbiased opinion.
Yeah, I think he looked at what works best for him, because when having gone to Spain, I think in 2017, 2018, that didn't seem to work out very well for him, and he sought more playing time in Japan, and we have seen what he can do by getting more time on the field. As you say, it's only in his interest that he gets more playing time, and at the end of the day, maybe just some extra bucks. We have not been able to call him up for the national, team. But then again, it's for him to continue performing at that level and making sure that he delivers every day.
Well, that's a wrap. I think it's time for us to take a time out. What do you think, Richie?
Definitely, I need some time out as well. And hopefully we'll see you all in a few days. And thank you for listening, and, give us your comments, give us your thoughts, and we look forward to a very, very aggressive
2020 was regressive, man. 2021 cannot be regressive. Let's pick a struggle.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yep. And that's about it from us. My name is Michael Kwambo, MK, and that is Richie Wanjohi. It's time for a timeout. See you next time. Yes, Richie.
Umezima live recording bwana.
Si I'm editing it.